Hi, my name is Karen Holmes. I'm the founder and director of the World Peace Organization for the One World Government. I'm the principal of the organization, which means that I deal with the legalities of it. Although I'm not an attorney, I'm a psychic, I'm a channel. And my gift from God is to be able to communicate with anyone on the other side. And some of my guides are Thomas Jefferson, John Adams, Benjamin Franklin, and some of the people who were kings and queens, and people like Alexander of Macedonia. And basically they're all giving their own interpretation of what we're working to create, as if they were all giving their input and from their own experience, which is what everybody is going to be doing, but they're doing it from the other side. So I'm using my gift to be able to do that. Today, what I wanted to do is talk about protecting the U.S. Supreme Court. My guides, before I can channel again, I need to have 2 more channels who are willing to work with me. And right now, basically, we're in the stage of this idea to create the international government called herding cats. This is the first stage and the first government proposal we're working at creating, and we are basically, an idea has been introduced, and now everybody is just either likes the idea or hates the idea, and they're working to stop it, and they're working to do everything to control it. They like the idea, but they don't see the full idea. They're controlling it, just like cats. So the reason I'm bringing that up today is because eventually what will happen, a friend of mine is a printer. I'm not sure, he's a cat right now. And in his print shop, he had a sign that says, for every movement, it starts out with passive acceptance, then active resistance, and then everybody decides that it's a great idea. So that's basically where we are now, is people kind of like it or hate it a little bit, but then there's active resistance, and then what happens is everybody agrees to it. So imagine what happens right now is that's what's happening to the U.S. Supreme Court. The plan for the international government has been introduced, but the letter to the Supreme Court, the letter that I channeled to the Supreme Court, basically introduces universal law into the legal system. So let's say the legal system now is herding cats. We've come to the point where trying to get everyone together, they can't even get the 9 members of the Supreme Court to agree on it, and they agreed on it. But the interpretation now is what's important in how it's going to affect. Okay, so let's say that people believe the Supreme Court justices believe they have the right to interpret the law. Okay, but what happens when you throw this monkey wrench in, which is a new tenet of our legal system? A universal law that's supposed to get rid of the chaos, but all of a sudden everybody's just going out of their mind, running around trying to figure out how to stop it. We can't do this. And the reason for it is because it creates, whenever you make a change, it has to go through this movement idea, where it separates the people into 4 groups. So the overview thing that we're working with now, the overview movement, is the World Peace Movement. But before it can come about, we have to purify the legal system. If the U.S. Constitution is going to be the basis for the international government, basically all those people who have said they're standing up to defend it, and they're basically grabbing for power, and they're using it as a way to get themselves reelected, because they're standing on the Constitution, on the law. What happens if you have this same schism in the courts? What happens if you have the people who stand on the principles, they should all be standing on the principles. They should be all standing on the law. They swear their oath of office to stand on the law. But what happens when they don't? When their focus is for their own interests, or when their focus for this? When this is the kind of thing that happens when let's say Donald Trump now is getting all sorts of problems because of the breaking the law. If he was functioning for his own interests in that group, then he's the one who started the rebellion. If you look at the world peace marketing strategy idea, it sees there's 4 different groups of people, and the one who stands on the principles, the power, the lives are affected, and then those who function for their own interests. It enables all 4 of those groups of people to get their life. It's like doorways that they go through. But when the people stand on the principles, then it goes through the battles of Armageddon, which is where it breaks apart, and eventually they go different directions. Okay. When we're protecting the U.S. Supreme Court, if the U.S. Supreme Court has a new tenet of our legal system, they don't know how to deal with it yet. They don't know the ramifications of it yet. They don't have any idea. They get this letter and they're holding on to it, and they're going, okay. So somebody like Ruth Bader Ginsburg would look at it and say, it's about time. It's about time. I can see how this will work. But the other people don't. And then the people who function for their own interests are going, we're going to try and control and manipulate this, and we're going to undermine the Supreme Court, the people they were meant to protect. They're dealing with all of this functioning for their own interests, and this is not what our interests were supposed to bring us. Okay? So that's where we are now, is if it's not that it's a 6-3, and they're, even with Chief Justice John Roberts on siding with the liberals, that's not going to, packing the court isn't going to, it doesn't really matter, because if you have let's say an odd number of justices, I mean packing the court with the idea of putting 25 Supreme Court justices, and then like an appellate court idea, if you have, it doesn't matter. The international government we can decide, and this is something that we'll be talking about when a manual for the one world government comes out, because it talks about setting up a Supreme Court, and it doesn't really matter how many justices there are, because some of them might just want time off and being able to go in, work for 3 months or whatever, and then take the rest of the time off to read or learn or to experience things. They have the right to their life too. It's going to be decided, but basically, and it doesn't matter. But what does matter is that the Constitution needs to be protected. But do we have to protect it? When you write a Constitution, that creates a government. And our founding fathers created put 3 branches: the legislative branch, the executive branch, and the judicial branch. And all of it are co-equal branches of the government. The President of the United States doesn't decide what's happening in the Supreme Court, just like he doesn't decide what's happening in Congress. And Congress doesn't decide that. They all have their duties and roles and responsibilities. So as long as the Constitution stands, and we have a government, we're not a failed state yet, basically what will happen is the Supreme Court will be there, except who's on it. And is it going to be somebody who's going to shift it so far to one side or the other that the other people are not going to agree with it? So the question is this. So let's say we can focus on the idea of what the Constitution does. Now, they don't decide. The Constitution, let's say it's like the father, mother, and son idea. We have universal law, constitutional law, and federal law. So the Congress has to address, and the president have to stand on their policies, and their laws have to stand on both universal law and constitutional law. The Constitution reflects where we are as a nation in our evolution. When they first started, the founding fathers couldn't resolve the issue of slavery. That didn't come out until the Civil War. That was addressed during the Civil War, the issue of slavery. But what they did was, so you can see that the amendments and all the different issues, it evolves along with us as a society, as a nation. Okay, but what happens is the Constitution then addresses the use of power and the abuse of power, what the rights and duties and privileges and responsibilities are for elected officials, but also when to remove them. That's use of power. But the abuse of power is when they break their oath and they're not, let's say, standing on the principles of universal law and constitutional law. Let's say the father and the mother come together. Universal law pegs us on a very high level. We are endowed by our Creator with certain unalienable rights. When you say, we are one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, you see, those pledges and those are our founding fathers basically pegged our country on a very high level with liberty and justice for all. So when you have foreign or domestic policy that doesn't go along with that, that's when they're kind of abusing their power. And it's the same thing with the acts and the policies of our elected officials and the legislation from the legislative branches. They have to stand on both of those principles, or it creates chaos in the system. Okay, but there's also chaos in the system when you introduce a new idea and people go haywire because they're basing their power, their own personal power, their own agenda, their own self-interest. They rely on the existing structure for their own security and support. It's the same thing as the idea of bringing slavery in. The people who wrote the Constitution, and they believed that they were going to be equal and just for everyone. They had the people from the South, the states in the South, their economy was based on slavery. And if they abolished the slavery as part of the Constitution, it would destroy their economy. So they had to address that. We had to evolve into that. We're an evolving nation, but we can also be a devolving nation. So there's two different kinds of chaos. When you are herding cats because you have a new idea and you're opening it up for debate, and people are going, we don't like that, we don't like that, we don't like that. Okay, so, or when you're functioning for your own interest and you're grabbing for power, and you are, at that point, you're a cat. So every plan has to address this whole idea. So let's now consider that the founding fathers like John Adams and Sam Adams, they understood the principles. Patrick Henry, his group of people, the Sons of Liberty basically, were standing on the principles. But the people like Alexander Hamilton didn't come in. And in fact, one of my books, I channeled a book with Alexander Hamilton called Grabbing for Power. He talked about how he was grabbing for power, and this is part of the Power series books. He explains about, from his perspective, like a modern day Republican, talking about grabbing for power. And then what happened is that they had to evolve, but the international government is going through the same situation. A new idea has been opened up to debate, and we're herding cats. We're in the first part of this idea. So now we're opening all of these ideas up to debate. So our plan has to benefit everyone. We have to deal with the Catholic Church. We have to deal with unifying the religions. We have to deal with the economy, making it possible for everybody to get their life. How to deal with the three unalienable rights, among others. There's others that we have to address too, which is to be able to create the life you want without interference, to fulfill your purpose in life. Imagine how that's going to deal with all of these ideas related to abortion or immigration, or all of these ideas to be treated fairly and equally. How about Black Lives Matter issues, racism, all the prejudice and ulterior motive issues, and then how to have a voice in your government. What happens if you have a new idea and can solve problems and you don't have a voice in your government? That's what leads to terrorism. So if we are having a domestic terrorism and the idea is to drive the people out, that doesn't solve problems. You have to address the root cause of the problems. That's where we come in as our organization. We are going to be, once I can bring in 2 more channels, who are no longer fighting to defend themselves or herding cats or whatever, then what we're going to do is we're going to have group channeling sessions for the president and the senators and the Supreme Court justices, and then we're going to explain the application of all this, not with the idea that we're telling them what to do. We never tell people what to do. We tell them how to do it. Okay, then it's up to you what you do. Okay? And then after we start to do this, we're going to have our dinner parties where we have like group channeling sessions, and with the people who have projects, they'll come together with the Supreme Court justices, for example, and talk about the law, and they're going to talk about the application of it and work with Thomas Jefferson and Benjamin Franklin and John Adams. And my gift is to be able to communicate with anyone on the other side, and we're going to talk about all these people, and the people on the other side are willing to come and help too, speak from their own experience, and then we write books on it, like I did with Alexander Hamilton about grabbing for power. Then those are going to be available for anybody to read. It's a part of a body of knowledge that's going to come about, that's going to be around this. And then anybody who can take an idea, these are ideas, and anybody can take the ideas and write their own books about this and publish their own books about the international government. What will happen is this: when Alexander Hamilton realized that the idea had gone too far and that he had lost his money, that he had lost his financial support, he was dragged into the Revolutionary War, not because he saw the principles, but because of the principles of the money and the power associated with it. Then they became statesmen. They fought tooth and nail to prevent it from coming about. They didn't go to the meetings. The people who went to the meetings were the ones who stood on the principles, the conventions. And then the ones who came in were the ones who saw that after the war, the Revolutionary War was over, then they saw that there was the power, that it affected the people. It had gone too far. It had even when John Adams became president, then he had to deal with like the people coming back from England and we're Americans, but we got dragged over there, and now it's time for us to come home again. So they had to deal with how to deal with these people. Okay, so all of this is something where eventually those Republicans who basically are fighting for their lives and getting revenge, and they talk about other people being Republicans in name only, but they're actually seditionists, things like that. Basically, they've got dragged into Donald Trump's power grab and he basically is functioning for his own interests. I've talked about that before, how to tell the difference between people who function for their own interests. They're the ones that start rebellions. So he's the one who started a rebellion. But it's not that the revolution is going to be a rebellion where Donald Trump takes over the world. Nobody is going to vote for somebody who functions for his own interests. He just keeps on losing power because power grabs always lead to a loss of power. It's the people who understand where true power comes from that have the power. And they know they have the power, and that's where they wield it, because basically that's something that they know they have, and they get more of it. If you know where true power comes from, and you get more of it, it's given to you because you understand where true power comes from, and the people don't have to stand up and do anything other than to wield their power. So we can protect the U.S. Supreme Court as it's herding cats right now. The letter to the Supreme Court has basically caused a whole lot of problems with Joe Biden's. President Biden is in crisis right now, too, because Donald Trump has left some landmines, like people who are there and loyal to him, and people who are the Republicans who are loyal to him, too, and the staff people, and rooting them out isn't necessarily going to end the crisis. So what he has to do is he has to figure out how to solve this problem. And we're going to be working with the president too when he realizes that he doesn't know the application of this. He's running into problems now with the horses, his immigration policy. It's not standing on universal law. He's looking at the Constitution, and he's looking at the federal law, and he says that gives me the right to do this, but it's not what we are as a nation. He said, okay, so no matter what he has done in the past to create a sense of unity, it's not going to work, because our country is in the process of going through the schism, through the battles of Armageddon. Eventually, it's going to go different directions. But then the people who go different directions are going to have to figure out how to get their life, because you can't get your life by getting revenge. It's not a tool that you can use. Now I'm rambling on and on. The Supreme Court really doesn't need to be protected. Basically what it needs to do is figure out how to apply this information. It's going through the herding cat idea, just like the rest of the country. And the way to deal with that is to understand the battles of Armageddon, the planning process, how to stand on the principles, what happens when you stand on the principles, all these ideas. And that's the first idea. I'm going to give you an example of this, of when it started, before I go on, before I stop today. When Saddam Hussein stood up and said that he was the president, the duly elected president of Iraq, and that the United States didn't have the right to topple him, he was standing on principles. That caused George W. Bush to basically go kind of ballistic. We're taking over you. It threatened his security and support. He was grabbing for power. And basically he just got blasted over and over again, to the point now where Saddam Hussein was hanged, and we'll go into that in The Faith of the Puree, another book that I channeled with Saddam Hussein, Carol Wojtyla, Jesus of Nazareth, Moses, Gautama Buddha, the Prophet Muhammad, Rama, Confucius, Lao Tzu, and Lady Gaia, and I Am That I Am. It's going to unify the world's 7 major religions. It's the application of this idea. Okay, so that's how we bring in the people, and the support is with our books. That allows us to explain how this all works. And in words, I'm not very good at explaining. I'm a platform thinker, so I'm kind of like bouncing all over the place, where other people who are logical will lay out ideas. I'm bringing in this idea, and this idea, and this idea, and this idea. And so people look at me and say, she's all over the place. But when you bring together a logical thinker and a platform thinker, then that's like George Washington and Alexander Hamilton. They get along really well because one was a logical thinker and one was a platform thinker. Okay, so that was just an aside here. So now I'm going to just let this go now and say, when the international government comes about, we're going to set up a Supreme Court. And when the people come in, like the Republicans who basically have turned their lives over to Donald Trump and realize that they can't get their lives by turning their lives over to Donald Trump, basically they'll come back and they'll suddenly become the great thinkers, the Federalist people from this. And like John Adams, he's going to go, those guys, they don't stand on principles. And then he was always very frustrated because they felt that they were the experts on it. They were the brilliant people who understood the Constitution better than anybody else. Maybe it's because they learned their lesson. It'll be interesting. We're reliving history. This is the revolution that we're talking about. We're reliving the American Revolution, but this is now the world peace plan that's being introduced. Not we're taking the idea of our Constitution to the next level and basically to create an international government. If it can bring world peace in the United States, it can also bring peace on the international level when we treat all the nations the same way the states are treated. We know how this works. We know how the Constitution works. We may be totally messed up in understanding the application of it, but that's when these books will come in handy for you. You'll understand the application of it. And if you want to learn more, you can learn more. The newsletters and the books and the government proposals will explain where we have failed policy and what needs to be done to bring it about. Okay? So there we go. We're going to protect the Supreme Court by addressing this idea of herding cats, of our channeling sessions where Alexander Hamilton and Benjamin Franklin and Thomas Jefferson and John Adams come back and give their perspective on it. And then, don't you think that those members of Congress, the senators or the Supreme Court justices, would like to have an evening with Thomas Jefferson and find out exactly what they meant when they did that, talking about the principles? If you could have an evening with Thomas Jefferson, what would he say about the Constitution? What would he say about evolution? If Amy Coney Barrett or any of those textualists or originalists come out and say, well, we stand on that, what happens if they are totally backwards from what they think they are? Okay? So that's where we are now. We're going to protect the Constitution, and we're going to protect the Supreme Court by standing on the principles that we are going to purify it, and then we're going to use it as the basis for the international government. Okay. Thank you for listening. Like, share, and subscribe. Comment down below, and make sure that because join the debate. Okay? Thank you.